Welcome, delegates, to Track 4 Technology. Let us welcome the presenter, Nur Esmeralda binti Muhammad Jasni, with her final year project titled The Use of Game-Based Learning Platforms to Improve Students' Participation in English Lessons.
Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Nur Esmeralda binti Muhammad Jasni and the title of my final year project is the use of game-based learning platforms to enhance students' participation in English lessons. The purpose of this study is to study the use of game-based learning platforms to improve students' participation in English lessons. There are two research objectives in my study, which are to identify the type of game-based learning used by the pre-service teachers and to analyze the impacts of game-based learning towards students' participation during English lesson. Same goes to the research questions, which are what are the type of game-based learning used by the pre-service teachers to improve students' participation during English lesson, and how did the use of game-based learning improve students' participation during the English lesson. For the literature review, based on the articles, I can conclude that game-based learning and entertainment games is that game-based learning are designed for educational rather than recreational objectives. Students are more engaged in learning the English language when game-based learning is implemented in their lesson. Moving on to the methodology, I use quantitative and qualitative method. There are two instruments used in my study, which are survey and structured interview. For the survey, I have prepared a Google form that consists of 3 sections for the respondents to answer. The first section is respondents' information. The second section is type of game-based learning they have used before. And the third section is regarding the impacts of game-based learning towards students' participation during the English lesson. For the structured interview, I have prepared 5 questions. Four ESL pre-service teachers were interviewed through Google Meet and WhatsApp voice note. For the findings, based on the survey, a total of 30 respondents answered the survey. The majority chose quiz games as the most used type of game-based learning. The majority of respondents also agreed that game-based learning is effective in enhancing students' participation in English lesson, and the students become more motivated to participate in the activities provided during the English lesson. As for structured interview, all 4 of the ESL pre-service teachers agreed that game-based learning is suitable to be used in English lesson, as it gives a positive impact towards students, especially on students' participation, motivation, and interest during the English lesson. However, they have a similar response on the negative impact of game-based learning towards students, which is game-based learning can be time-consuming. To conclude my study, teachers must figure out how to get students to participate in the learning process in the most effective way possible. With the support of game-based learning, teachers will be able to intrigue students' interest in learning English by engaging them in meaningful activities. The implementation of game-based learning benefits both of the teachers and students. Teacher will gain a positive feedback on students' involvement during the lesson, and students will be able to improve their performance in the learning process. That is all from me. Thank you for listening.
Next presenter, Lim Chu Jian, on his final year project titled Implementing Multimedia to Improve ESL Students' Participation in Classroom.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lim Chu Jian, matrix number D201810825991, and the topic of my study is implementing multimedia to improve students' participation in classrooms under Associate Professor Dr. Maiza Tuliza binti Muhammad. First, let me introduce my topic. English language teachers are continuously improving their teaching methods and approaches to motivate students' interests in their lessons. This research was conducted to the researchers' experience during ESL lessons, that students were more responsive and participated in discussions more frequently when multimedia was implemented in the lessons. Moving on, let me briefly go over a few literatures related to this study. So McGreal R. and Elliot M. in 2008 noted that all levels of education stand to benefit from what the internet has to offer. It is a communication tool that can effectively help teachers to distribute additional content, such as useful educational videos or interactive or collaborative work for students. Furthermore, Mukherjee in 2018 elaborates on how the multiple forms of multimedia can be applied and how it affects the students' learning process and experience. For example, the researcher explained that a video can provide an intricate level of detail, ideal for illustrating subtle and non-verbal information. Moving on to methodology, this action research was carried out with a qualitative approach by analyzing the issues that occurred during classroom lessons and analyzing the data that were collected. This study uses an action research approach where the researcher first reflects upon their teaching methods by reviewing a video recording of a class that was conducted along with the reflection entries. An action research involves 4 stages: planning, action, observation, and reflection. 1 cycle is completed when the researcher fulfills these 4 stages. 2 cycles of action research were completed in this study. The research instruments that were used in this study are video recording of classes that were conducted and reflection entries by the researcher. The video recording was transcribed and analyzed using thematic analysis. The reflection entries were also analyzed using thematic analysis to identify patterns to answer the research questions. Moving on to findings and discussion. Research question 1. So based on the thematic analysis of the teacher's reflection entries, it can be seen that the teacher has had a positive impression towards the implementation of multimedia, particularly videos and Google Maps. He explained that the use of the video in the lesson was beneficial over the use of static pictures, as they can see the process of how the eagle was built while also including auditory elements. In short, the use of video in this lesson provided an extra layer of depth that students otherwise would not be able to experience, especially in a simple reading text. Then, in the next lesson, the teacher observed that due to the great response from the students in the previous lesson on eagles, he also reused the Google Maps application again in this lesson on penguins. In short, the teacher used multimedia in both lessons, especially Google Maps and videos, for 2 reasons: to add depth and complement the students' understanding of the reading text, and to encourage their interest in the topic that is being taught. Moving on to research question 2. So after going through the video transcription, the implementation of multimedia such as videos and Google Maps not only captured the students' attention, but it also encouraged them to be more inquisitive, prompting them to request the teacher to elaborate further on details. The teacher provided the students with a tour of an igloo using Google Maps. So during the Google Maps tour, the students were noticeably very inquisitive. They were asking for details that were not covered in the video or reading text. The implementation of multimedia in this lesson had encouraged the students to improve their understanding beyond the reading text that was provided. However, based on the observation of the 2 videos of the classes that were conducted by the teacher, there was no observable difference in terms of student participation after the video finished playing. Nevertheless, the teacher stated in his reflective entry that although it made no difference in terms of student participation, he believes that it helped the students in answering the crossword puzzle that was based on the reading text about penguins. With that, I conclude my study with this. The results of this study reveals that the implementation of multimedia does indeed improve ESL students' participation in English lessons. Most notably, the application of Google Maps had encouraged students to be more inquisitive and involved in the topics that were being taught. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Next presenter, Jacqueline Korean Anak Anthony, with her final year project titled The Implementation of Class Dojo in Enhancing Students' Engagement in Grammar Lesson During Online Learning.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacqueline Korean Anthony, and today I will present to you my final year project. The title of my final year project is The Implementation of Class Dojo in Enhancing Student Engagement in Grammar Lesson During Online Learning. The purpose of this study is to examine the implementation of Class Dojo in helping teachers gain more engagement from the students and to identify the student attentiveness during online learning. The problem that I found in my study are the lacks of responses from the students due to their poor internet connection and the lack of experience in handling the application, which is the Class Dojo. There are two research objectives for this study. The first one is to identify the factors, and the second one is to determine the usage of ClassDojo in enhancing student engagement in grammar lesson during online learning. Now move on to the next one is the research question. The first one is what are the factors lead to students' lack of engagement? And the second one is how ClassDojo can enhance student engagement in grammar lesson during the online learning. Now move on to the literature review. From what I can summarize up, I can narrow it down into two aspects. The first one is how the students are adapting to their new learning environments. And the second one is how teachers are able to make use of the application, which is the ClassDojo, to its fullest potential in order to monitor students' behavior and attentiveness during the online learning. Now, move on to the methodology of the study. I use qualitative research for the data collection and content analysis method to analyze the data. In this study, there are two instruments that I use. The first one is the questionnaire, and the second one is the semi-structured interview. For the questionnaire, there are 25 samples involved. Meanwhile, for the semi-structured interview, there are 2 English teachers who are involved as the samples. Now, move on to the result and the finding. Now, there are 5 factors that lead to student lacks of engagement. The first one is the unproductivity learning environment. The second one is the poor internet connection. And the third one is the lack of concentration. The fourth one is the lack of interest toward the lesson. And the last one is where the students sharing their devices with their parents and their siblings. Move on. Next is the usage of ClassDojo from the student perspective. There are 5 usage of ClassDojo from the student's perspective. The first one is make learning experience fun. The second one is create a healthy competitive environment for the student. The third one is make student feel rewarded. The fourth one is make student attentive in class. And the last one is restrict the student behavior through the division of the negative point. Now, the next one is the semi-structured interview responses. To summarize up the response from the 2 samples, the ClassDojo is easy to use, in which the teacher can use the application to check the student attendance. The second one is the teacher can easily access the students directly. And the third one is the teacher can control the way students behave in the online class through the division of the negative point. To summarize it up, ClassDojo indeed help the teachers in increasing the students' engagement. Now, to conclude my presentation, if the students are able to adapt to the new learning environment, the teacher should also be able to adapt the new ways of teaching the students and explore the available techniques or application available in order to enhance students' engagement. And lastly, before I end my presentation, I would like to suggest a future research here called the attitude of students towards speaking activity using application with avatar. That's all for me. Thank you for listening.
Next presenter, Dalili binti Muhammad Suki, with her final year project titled Oopsie's Pre-Service Teacher's Perception on the Use of YouTube as a Teaching Aid in the Online English Classroom.
Hi, good day everyone and Assalamualaikum. My name is Dalili, and in this video I'm going to present to you my research study regarding the Oopsie's Pre-Service Teacher's Perception on the use of YouTube as a teaching aid in an online English classroom. So we completed our first teaching practicum for 8 weeks during the semester 6 sem break, if you remember, but we couldn't go to the school to meet them, to teach them physically due to the increase of coronavirus cases. So we were forced to switch to online teaching, or ODL. I believe that learning English require a very strong guidance from the teachers, but it's kind of hard to build the connection with the students during LM, because we didn't even meet them at all physically. So because of the current learning situation, teachers are encouraged to use a technology-based teaching aids to support the interaction and communication between students. So there are many online platforms that the teacher can use. This study focuses only on YouTube, the use of YouTube in teaching online in learning English language. Okay, first thing first, after I decided to go with this focus, I did a lot of research, read a lot of articles, previous studies regarding the related topics. So I found a lot of research that suggests teachers should create an interesting learning environment through a platform. So in my context is YouTube, on how to use the video, to use the function of the sounds, the graphics, or the text to grabs the students' interest in learning the target language. So by this, my research objectives are first to observe the UPSIS pre-service teachers' perception on the use of YouTube as a teaching aid in the online English classroom, and second, to identify the benefits of the YouTube in English class, online English class, to the teachers and the students based on their previous experience in LM1. Okay, next for the data collection, I used two instruments. First one is the survey, where I've created a survey through Google Form and then sent it to 34 UPSIS pre-service teachers that are currently on semester 7 via WhatsApp. The second instrument is teachers' reflective entries, where I've collected 6 reflective entries that contain the reflection on the use of YouTube in online teaching practice. Now moving on to the findings of the research. Based on the data analysis, the outcomes have answered my 2 research questions very well. The result achieved from the survey and also from the reflective entries during the teaching practice revealed the positive perception on the application of YouTube in teaching practice. More than 15% of the respondents agree with all the benefits of YouTube to the teachers, the students, and the overall functions in online English classroom. In most of the reflective entries, the teachers highlighted that the students feel comfortable whenever the teachers include YouTube in online teaching, as they are very familiar with the app. Also, the students would interact more after watching a video from YouTube, which led to a very interactive discussion in online classroom. Based on the reflection, some teachers use YouTube as a tool to enhance students' comprehension regarding some topics. For example, the students will understand the short story better after watching a clip from YouTube. It's aligned with my literature review, where a research from Al-Murashi 2016. The study mentioned that the students should use the tool to enhance their comprehension with or without the teacher's guidance. Other than that, using the YouTube platform to share the pre-recorded video for the asynchronous class, or to share a video in general regarding the knowledge that the student should know, give the student the freedom to watch the video anytime they want, while considering their internet connection and situation. In conclusion, the majority of UPSIS pre-service teachers have a very optimistic views towards the implementation of YouTube as a teaching aid in learning English in online classroom. Despite some minor rejection of the incorporation of YouTube in online classroom, this research has shown the application of YouTube brings value to the teaching and learning process in ODL. Before I end my presentation, I would like to thank Dr. Maiza and my supervisor, Dr. Aladdin, for all the guidance. And thank you to the respondents for the contribution to my research study. Thank you so much for listening, and have a good day.
Next presenter, Abdul Rahman bin Hamid, with his final year project titled Pre-Service Teacher Perception towards the use of Kahoot as a learning tool in ESL classroom.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and greetings to everyone. My name is Abdul Rahman bin Hamid and my matric number is D2018-1082657. I am under the supervision of Dr. Aladin Asaikali. So the topic of my final year project is pre-service teacher perception towards the use of Kahoot as learning tool in ESL classroom. Moving on to the research introduction, the problem statement for this research is how Kahoot can be used in ESL classroom. The research objective for this research is, the first one is to investigate the use of Kahoot in ESL classroom. The second one is to identify the advantages and disadvantages of Kahoot in ESL classroom. And moving on to the research question, the first research question is how Kahoot can be used in ESL classroom to increase students' participation in ESL classroom. The second one is what is the advantages and disadvantages of using Kahoot in ESL classroom. So for the literature review, there are two things identified within the research. The first one is gamification. Dallas 2015 mentioned that game-based learning is a best practice in education, and finding ways to integrate competitive game in the classroom promote learning is essential for educators in the 21st century. The second one is Kahoot and learning educational platform. Wang 2015 mentioned Kahoot is a new generation of digital game-based student response system that focus on increasing student engagement and motivation together with assessing students' understanding of the lesson. Okay, next is the methodology of the research. Okay, this research focus on two methods, which is quantitative and also qualitative method. Also can be said as a mixed method. So the instrument used in this method and this research is reflective entry for qualitative and questionnaire for the quantitative data collection. So for the analysis, this research used thematical analysis and also descriptive analysis. So the target population for this research is self-reflective entry and also 40 respondents, which is a pre-service teacher majoring in Bachelor of Education in TESOL. Now we will be moving on to the qualitative finding for this research. There are 4 question poses in this qualitative finding, which is why do you Kahoot in your lesson. The second one is how was the student participation in ESL online classroom. The third one is what are the problems faced when playing Kahoot game in ESL classroom, and the fourth one is what are the advantages and disadvantages of using Kahoot. To summarize this qualitative finding, it can be seen that Kahoot is being widely used in ESL classroom. By using Kahoot, the student participation are increasing. There are also some problems identified when using Kahoot, and also there are few advantages and disadvantages of using Kahoot in ESL online classroom. Okay, now we will be moving on to the quantitative data finding on the pre-service teacher perception towards the use of Kahoot in ESL classroom. Based on the chart presented in the slide, we can see that majority of the respondents use Kahoot in their lesson. The number of students participate in the Kahoot game is around 11 to 20 students, and also 31 to 40 students participate in the Kahoot game. So the most form taught during the teaching practical is form 2 and also form 4, and also based on the quantitative data finding, it can be identified that a major problem faced by the pre-service teacher when using Kahoot is students get disconnected in the middle of the game. Okay, based on the slide, we can see the result of the quantitative data finding for the advantages of using Kahoot. In the questionnaire, there are 14 question poses for the advantages of using Kahoot. In this slide, there are only 4 significant results from the advantages of using Kahoot. The first one is Kahoot is a fun and attractive game. The second one is Kahoot can be played with a lot of participants. The third one is Kahoot can make a lesson more interesting and fun. And the last one is Kahoot can be used as teaching tool to support students in learning English language. So now we will be moving on to the disadvantages of using Kahoot. In the slide, as we can see, there are 4 charts for the disadvantages of using Kahoot. There are the significant disadvantages that can be identified based on the pre-service teacher perception. Okay, so the first one is Kahoot consume a lot of data. The second one is in order to access Kahoot, students need a good gadget. The third one is Kahoot can be stressful sometimes, and the last one is Kahoot background music can distract students' attention. Okay, so in conclusion, this study concludes that Kahoot is an excellent learning tool that can be used in ESL classroom. For the implication in education, Kahoot can be implemented in ESL classroom to support students in learning English language. So for the future research, this research will focus in large area of groups, so more data can be collected. So I think that is all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Nur Atika Binti Lewi with her final year project titled The Use of PowerPoint in Increasing Students' Participation in Online English Lessons.
Assalamualaikum and greetings. My name is Nur Atika Binti Lewi and the title of my final year project is The Use of PowerPoint in Increasing Students' Participation in Online English Lessons. First of all, let's start with the problem statement. The problem that will be addressed in this study is the lack amount of students' participation in the classroom. Students' participation is one of the most important elements for effective learning. However, it is a challenge for teachers to achieve in the classroom. Based on my own reflection of past teaching experience, students were very passive and reluctant to respond, especially in online English lessons. Therefore, the aim of this study is to use PowerPoint to help increase students' participation in online English lessons, with the research questions being: what are the uses of PowerPoint in online English lessons? And how often will students participate when PowerPoint is implemented in the online English lessons? The second aspect that I'll be describing next is the methodology. The participants which were involved were 22 Form 1 students. This research uses mixed methods which integrates both qualitative and quantitative methods with observation and lesson transcriptions. There were 4 lesson recordings which were used to collect data for this research. The third aspect that I will be describing next is the data analysis and results. The collected data are analyzed and categorized to answer the research questions. Let's look at the first research question, which is: what are the uses of PowerPoint in online English lessons? Based on my analysis, I was able to discover 5 different uses of PowerPoint. The first one is augmentation. Augmentation is the use of a well-designed graph or table or a relevant picture. I was able to identify 2 ways of how augmentation can be used. The first one is by using a relevant picture to help students recall information easily. The second one is using relevant pictures to provide visual instructions to students. The second use of PowerPoint is multimedia learning. The third use of PowerPoint is game-based interactive PowerPoint. In the recorded online lessons, there were 2 ways game-based interactive PowerPoint can be implemented in online lessons. The first one is an alphabet puzzle, whereas the second one is a game in stages, and students will use the poll feature to vote their answers. The fourth use of PowerPoint is text presentation. The fifth use of PowerPoint is alternative recap. Now, let's move on to the second research question, which is: how often will students participate when PowerPoint is implemented in the online English lessons? In lesson 1, based on this table, students' participation in both writing and taking part in joining in a dialogue is higher during the use of augmentation PowerPoint in comparison to the students' participation when PowerPoint was not used. Moreover, the number of responses was the highest during the game-based interactive PowerPoint in the lesson. In lesson 2, based on this table, using PowerPoint as multimedia learning was able to gain the most participation. However, it is also clear that the text presentation PowerPoint was not able to gather more responses than the use of Padlet. In lesson 3, based on this table, the total number of responses during the game-based interactive PowerPoint was the highest and illustrates a big difference compared to the discussion on the online task sheet. Whereas the use of augmentation in PowerPoint as a form of instruction giving medium does not improve student participation. In lesson 4, based on this table, there is a big difference in participation during the use of alternative recap PowerPoint and during the discussion on the online session. Based on the data analysis, it can be summarized that game-based learning PowerPoint, multimedia learning, and augmentation for visual presentation rather than instructions were the uses of PowerPoint that was able to increase students' participation in the selected online English lessons. That's all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Tan Lee Ying, with her final year project titled The Usage of Digital Materials in Enhancing Students' Participation in an ESL Classroom.
Hello everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Tan Lee Ying, and today I'm going to present my final year project, which entitled The Usage of Digital Materials in Enhancing Student Participation in an ESL Classroom. First of all, I would like to introduce the background of the study. The changes of education from the past is the enormous technological revolutions that has taken place in this 21st century. The use of technology has been widely used by the teachers nowadays. Back then, we can only see blackboard, desks and chairs in the classroom. But now, teachers can use various types of teaching tools to elicit the student interest and their participation in classroom activities. So in this in this research paper, the digital materials will be stated and evaluated by the pre-service teacher as well as the researcher. So the problem statement is the student were passive when participating in a classroom which only use the traditional teaching tools such as textbook and worksheet. So the research objectives are to identify the use of digital materials in the pre-service teacher's teaching practice and to study the benefits of using those particular materials in her teaching and learning practice. The research questions are: what are the types of digital material used by the pre-service teacher and what are the benefits of using those digital materials? So for the literature review, I had read a few journal articles. So the significance of my literature review is the benefits of using digital instructional materials have been proven by the researcher. From the research that carried out by Ansa Yam and Tam, they indicate that digital materials can be considered as new trending teaching tools which are able to promote students' motivation to learn the language. And in their research, they actually state out a few benefits of using digital instructional materials. For example, the use of digital materials can make the teaching and learning practice become more interesting and interactive. So moving on to the methodology, quantitative and qualitative methods were used for this paper. And the instruments are video recorder, self-observation table, and also questionnaire. So as you can see from the slide, this is the self-observation table that I will have to fill in when while watching the video recording that I've recorded before. The video recorder of the pre-service teacher, basically. Okay, and also the questionnaire will be given to the students in Google Forms. So overall, I had received 63 responses from them. So now we were looking at the findings and discussions. So after the frequency calculations, 47.62% of the respondents thinks that the use of YouTube in a classroom is very likely, and 30.60% of the respondents thinks that the use of PowerPoint is very likely. However, there's only 12.70% of the respondents thinks that the use of audio tape is very likely in a classroom. 26.98% of the respondent does not like the use of flip grid in the classroom. Right, so regarding to the benefits of digital materials, 30.60% of the respondents strongly agreed that with the use of digital materials in the lesson, they were able to receive clear instruction from the teacher. 60.32% of the respondents agree that with the use of digital materials, it can help them to improve their problem-solving skills and also motivate their learning. Alright, so that's all from me. Thank you.
Next presenter, Ephilia Binti Erazali, with her final year project titled Exploring Students' Perceptions towards the Implementation of Synchronous and Asynchronous Online Teaching Mode in ESL Language Classroom.
Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Ephilia Binti Erazali. My matric card number is D2018108261 and the title of my final year project is Exploring Students' Perception Towards the Implementation of Synchronous and Asynchronous Online Teaching Mode in ESL Language Classroom. The research problem that I have identified in my studies are students show a greater preference towards asynchronous online teaching mode. In comparison to asynchronous online teaching mode, synchronous teaching mode recorded a lower participation rate. In addition, students also exhibit lower motivation during synchronous classes in compared to asynchronous classes. These issues, although seemingly trivial, may cause severe complication in the future. Hence, I am to study the weaknesses and strengths of each of the online teaching modes based on the student's perspective. There are three research objectives in my studies. First and foremost is to identify students' perception of synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode. The second one is to identify students' readiness for self-direction during synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode. And last but not least is to determine students' preferred modes between synchronous and asynchronous teaching mode and learning language online. Same goes for research question. There are also three research questions, which is what are the students' perception of synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode? What are the students' perception towards self-direction during the online teaching mode? And what are the students' preferred modes between synchronous and asynchronous teaching mode and learning online? For the literature review, on the other hand, past study reveals that while engaging in synchronous learning compared to asynchronous learning, students can find limited means of communication, hence to be more focused, feel greater sense of contribution, and experience better completion rate. It was also revealed from past studies that students in language online learning do not have enough learner autonomy, which means that they are not ready to be independent learner and self-direct themselves during language online learning. For methodology, a mixed method research design was employed via survey, questionnaire, observation, and document analysis. A total of 20 Form 3 students of a secondary school located on the outskirts of Upper Sabah took part as respondents in the study. The levels of proficiencies were between low intermediate to high intermediate level. The data collection instrument was divided into three of the questions, which is question 1 was answered using survey questionnaire, question 2 was answered using questionnaire and document analysis, which is teacher reflective entry, and question 3 was answered using questionnaire, video observation, and document analysis, which is teacher reflective entry. For data finding, the data finding was divided into three main themes, which is based on the research question. The first theme was the student's perspective towards the implementation of synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode. The study reveals that the students have a more positive perspective towards the implementation of synchronous as compared to asynchronous online teaching mode. However, it is also important to take note, in my opinion, that a majority of the students feel that asynchronous online teaching mode allow them to be more motivated during the teaching session. For Theme 2, which is students' readiness for self-direction during synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode, the study reveals that the students also do not have enough learner autonomy, which means they are still not ready to self-direct themselves during synchronous and asynchronous online teaching mode, because they still require the students' direct guidance as well as the students present. They also prefer to work with their friends. However, it is also important to take note that they feel that they still can learn English without the teacher being present around them. For the third theme, which is students' preferred modes between asynchronous and synchronous teaching mode, it was revealed that the students prefer asynchronous better, And this also will solidify by the observation in video observation and also data analysis, which shows that the students are more motivated during asynchronous classes as compared to synchronous classes. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Next presenter, Winona Catalina Wino, with her final year project titled Virtual Teaching and Learning via the Telegram application during the pandemic.
Greetings, my name is Winona Catalina Wino. I am a semester 7 TESOL student and is under the supervision of Dr. Putri Zarina Megat Khalid. My final project title is Virtual Teaching and Learning via the Telegram application during pandemic. I'd like to justify my choice of research on the use of Telegram by stating the problem statement first. Based on my experience during practicum and also from recent studies on technology and virtual learning, I found out that students face difficulties to participate in online ESL classrooms due to poor internet connectivity. The objectives of the research are to investigate how the Telegram application can be utilized in English language teaching and learning, and to determine whether Telegram-based virtual education is effective for improving virtual learning. The research questions are: how can Telegram-based virtual learning be utilized in English language teaching and learning, and what are the improvements that the Telegram application can provide for the virtual learning sessions? As the pandemic continues, live conferencing applications or platforms like Zoom, Google Meet, and WebEx have become great tools to proceed with virtual learning. However, just like the problem statement that guided me into doing this research, virtual learning and teaching faces a big problem, which is poor internet connectivity. Live conferencing platforms, although very helpful, demand high usage of data, so a lot of students struggle with virtual learning. Teachers then tried text messaging applications, which needed less data compared to other big platforms, hence the term M-learning or mobile learning was created. Winters defined M-learning as when one uses a mobile device for learning purposes. Mansour states that Telegram application consumes the lowest internet data compared to other instant messengers or text messaging applications. A study carried out by Swaran Singh in 2020 found out that the application is good to conduct quizzes upon teaching vocabulary. I also found the drawback of this application from recent studies, and that we still, however, need internet access to open the application. The method of data collection is systematic literature review or library studies on which 40 articles have been reviewed and themes have been derived. Dewey and Rahota stated that systematic literature reviews are done very critically in order to answer the research questions. The findings are then extracted from the review of the articles based on the research questions. From this research, I have found that Telegram has great features that can aid virtual learning. However, teachers still need to be trained to use those features in order to get the maximum results in the classroom. The web developers should provide detailed instructions or tutorials for the users to learn. Farah Marzi emphasized that teachers will then carry the responsibility to present the application's features to the students. Next, the Telegram application already has the lowest data consumption. Using it to download files, send and receive text on the application will still require internet coverage. In any case, those who live outside places with no internet coverage will not be able to use the application or any other digital platforms available for virtual learning. The Telegram application is a very well-developed application. It has great features that can be utilized to teach English language in the classroom. However, there are still a number of features that we haven't discovered yet, and hopefully more tutorials from the application's website will be released so that all students and teachers can participate in virtual learning. That is all from me. Thank you so much for your attention.
Next presenter, Nur Azlina Saiful Arifin with a final year project titled The Study of Students and Teachers' Perception on Using Google Classroom for Online Learning During Pandemic.
Assalamualaikum and a very good day. The title of my final year project is The Study of Students and Teachers' Perception on Using Google Classroom for Online Learning During the Pandemic. The reason why I chose this title for my final year project is because to see both perceptions of students and teachers towards the use of Google Classroom as one of the main learning platforms during the pandemic. So the research objectives are, number one, to examine the students' view on using Google Classroom as one of the main learning platforms during the pandemic. Number two, to study the perceptions of teachers towards using Google Classroom as one of the platform in monitoring their students' performances during the pandemic. So the research questions are how students view Google Classroom as one of the main learning platform during the pandemic. Number two, how Google Classroom can help teachers in monitoring their students' performances virtually during the pandemic. Many studies have been carried out pertaining to this issue. As you can see here, these two quotations I got from the previous study, and the first one said that from Yuval Noah Harari, this pandemic has disrupted the education system and many changes has to be made. And the second one is Cole and Sandhya 2021 said that Google Classroom helps in keeping track of the lessons as it saves all the data in the user's Google account. I combined two research methodology for this study, which is the quantitative analysis and also qualitative analysis. For quantitative analysis, I use survey form as the instrument, whereas my qualitative analysis, I used interview with teachers as my instrument. So I'll start off with quantitative findings first. So these tables are the result from the survey form that I have distributed few months back to the students for this study. So there are 4 items in the survey form. The first one is ease of access. The second one is perceived usefulness. The third one, communication and interaction. And the last one is students' satisfactions towards using Google Classroom. So these two are the result for ease of access and perceived usefulness. As you can see here, majority of the students really think that it is easy to access the platform. As for perceived usefulness, majority of them also think that Google Classroom is very useful for their virtual learning during the pandemic. So the next one are the result for communication and interactions, and also the students' overall satisfactions towards using Google Classroom for their virtual learning. So for communication and interaction, most of the students actually chose neutral as their response, and I think this is because Google Classroom don't really help much in them for communicating or interacting with classmates or with the teachers. As for the student satisfaction, we can see that the majority of the students actually satisfied with the Google Classroom features and also with how Google Classroom has helped them in their virtual learning during the pandemic. Okay, so let's check out the qualitative findings. In order to get this result, I actually conducted 2 interviews with 2 language teachers. The reason why I conducted these interviews is because to answer the second research question and also to achieve the second research objectives. So the first teacher said that Google Classroom and the face-to-face classrooms actually have the same concept. It's just that it is set up online. It is a good platform. It makes the teaching and learning more documented. As for the teacher number 2, it says that you can assess reading, listening and writing easily when students submitted their works. But the problem here is that it is so hard to assess the student's speaking ability. So what I can say here that Google Classroom actually helps teachers in monitoring their students' performances, but there are certain parts that actually need a little bit of effort for them to do so that they can assess every skills. So I can conclude that Google Classroom is actually one of the alternatives to ensure the smooth running virtual teaching and learning during the pandemic. but I think not just during the pandemic, but also all the time, because it is a very good application. Also, Google Classroom help teachers to monitor their students' performances, because all of the students' data is actually documented in the user's Google account. So I think Google Classroom is actually one of the best choice for teachers and students to use for their teaching and learning.
Next presenter, Nur Fazlia binti Muhammad Isa, with her final year project titled The Challenges of Using Technology in Lesson Planning and the Effectiveness of Using Technology for ESL Students' Learning.
Hello everyone, my name is Ranta Mas Anak Sawit and my metric number is D201810826664 and my supervisor is Dr. Irene Aina binti Bahari. Okay, so today I will be presenting about my final year project, which is entitled The Use of Authentic Materials to Increase Learners' Interest in Learning English. Okay, so for my problem statement, learning an English language is crucial to countries' development. Therefore, teachers play an important role to ensure that students learn in a fun way. Despite teachers' employment of various teaching strategies to encourage the learner's interest in learning the subject, they do not seem to be interested in learning. Therefore, teachers need to be acknowledged in selecting the right materials in order to increase learners' interest in learning English language. Okay, so there are 3 research objective and research question. Okay, so for the first one, to identify the types of authentic materials used by pre-service teachers to increase learners' interest in learning English language. And the second one, to find out the criteria that pre-service teachers considered when selecting the authentic materials. And the last one, to investigate the advantages and disadvantages of using authentic materials in ESL classroom. For research question, what type of authentic materials did pre-service teachers frequently use when conducting English lessons? What is the main criteria that pre-service teachers considered when selecting authentic materials? And the last one, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using authentic materials in ESL classroom? Okay, for literature review, according to Pang and Moka, selecting materials that rely on learners' life experiences and interests is a good place to start. This shows that teaching materials are extremely crucial to consider during teaching and learning process. Indeed, authentic material is considered as good and interesting teaching material to be used in the classroom. This is supported by Tamo in 2009 when he mentioned that authentic materials could motivate the learners to learn as it adds a real life situation to the learner's learning experience. Okay, for my methodology, I use qualitative and quantitative, which is known as mixed methodology. I collect the data using an interview and a questionnaire through Google Form. Okay, so based on the data analyzed, I found out that most of the pre-service teachers chose authentic visual materials in their English classroom. The reason is that because it was interesting and motivating. In terms of the criteria, most of the pre-service teachers chose the materials according to their learners' interests. Okay, so moving on with my third objective, which is to investigate the advantages and disadvantages of using authentic materials in ESL classroom. Okay, so for the advantages, I found out that most of the pre-service teachers agreed to the fact that authentic materials are closer to learners' needs and interests, and it can be useful for them to use the same materials to teach different classes. However, the use of authentic materials could be time consuming, and sometimes it is hard for the pre-service teacher to choose or to find the appropriate materials that matches learners' ability. So as a conclusion, pre-service teacher can use any type of authentic materials as long as it focuses on the needs and interests of learners in in learning English language. So that is all from me. Thank you.
Our final presenter, Mashito binti Yahaya, with her final year project titled The Effects of Using Technology on Learning from the Perspective of Pre-Service Teachers in UPSI.
Assalamualaikum and greetings everyone. My name is Mashito binti Yahaya and today I will be presenting my research report entitled The Effects of Using Technology on Learning from the Perspective of Pre-Service English Teachers in UPSI. The problem statement of my research comes from the pre-service English teachers' insecurities of using technology. Nowadays, with technology constantly being developed, they are afraid that if they are using the wrong types of technology, it could have negative effects on students' learning. This will bring us to my research objective. This research aims to probe into the effects of using technology on learning from the perspective of pre-service English teachers in UPSI, to identify the types of technology being used by them and the reason behind their choice. Same goes to my research questions, which are what are the effects of using technology on learning based on the participants' LM1 experience, what are the types of technology being used in their classroom and the reason behind their choice. From the previous studies and articles, I can conclude that there are many researchers and teachers who support technology usage in the classroom as the positive effects on learning for both teachers and learners are greater than its drawbacks. The drawbacks would be the teacher's lack of confidence in using technology and of course poor internet connection, as it would hinder the lesson plan. There are three types of technology being identified, which are web-based technology, game-based technology, and social media technology. As for the methodology, this research used a quantitative method as the research approach. The instrument for this research are an online questionnaire survey and a transcript given by the participant to answer the open-ended question. By using the purposive sampling method, this research focuses on one population as a study group, which is the 4th year TESOL student in UPSI. A total of 14 of them participated in this research. Findings in this research will be answering the research question earlier. Descriptive analysis are being used to analyze the data. As for the finding on the effects of using technology on learning, on average, 13 of them, which is 92.9%, strongly agree that technology usage has positive effects on learning, while one participant took on a neutral stance on most of the questions given. This is due to poor internet connection in her area during her teaching practice. From the participant transcript, there are several positive effects that are being highlighted. The participants stated that they experienced the positive effect of using technology on learning from their teaching experience, which are in terms of increases student participation in the classroom, promote student interest and motivation towards the English language, boost student performance on English subjects, and lastly, smoothen the lesson flow. It is also found that from the three types of technology being mentioned in the online survey, web-based technology is the most popular types of technology among the participants with 85.7%, followed by social media technology and game-based technology with 64.3% and 42.9% respectively. One of the reasons for web-based technology being chosen is to make the lesson more entertaining and engaging. Social media technology is to facilitate students' poor internet connection, and lastly, game-based technology is to hype up students' motivations toward the content of the topic. To conclude my presentation, technology does bring positive effects towards learning if it's being implemented according to students' needs. It is a great hope that future teachers can make use of technology to its fullest, matching it with the expected learning effects. That is all from me. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
We hope you have gained knowledge from our presenters. Please do join us for the keynote speaker session that will begin shortly. Thank you and see you there.